Hey everybody, we will get started in a mere minute. Alrighty, let's see. Excellent, Scott. Thank you for checking in. I am live. Alrighty. It is now 7 o'clock, so we will start. Thanks for coming, everybody. I see there's 4 people in there now. I'm sure we'll get more as the hour progresses. Apologies for last month's live stream getting conked out. Some sort of weird update to my computer, not a Windows update, but some sort of app update, and it just killed my mics, and I couldn't figure out how to do it, and it took like a while to get it fixed. So, hey there, weird, fantastic toy adventures. I know you tell me your name every month, and I keep forgetting, but welcome. Hey TR, good to see you. Everybody all got their Halloween decorations up. Ours went up yesterday. Hey Brett. Hey Rubens. Good to see everybody. All right, this is really disconcerting because on my end, I can't see my picture of myself, which I normally can. So I don't know what's going on, but as long as you guys can see me, that's what matters. All righty. Let me just see if I can't jigger that. Hey, Fred. Welcome. We're just getting started here. I'm trying to figure out why I can't see myself, but we'll see about that. Let's see. What are these controls of which it speaks? Yeah, I don't know what that means. It's not doing what I think it's going to do. I am not. I'm using just the regular YouTube studio, and normally it just shows a picture of myself, and it's not. So, but like I say, as long as you guys can see me, that's what matters. So, oh man, everybody's, I'm sure, seeing the news about Wizards of the Coast getting a new CEO, big guy from Microsoft. Obviously, that has that portends some things in the digital arena. Oh man, still up on the. I'm still on the fence on as to whether or not I'm going to fully embrace it. I don't know. I kind of like the idea of I've just got books and dice and graph paper, but how long can I hold out? I don't know. We'll see. And of course, my new obsession, if those of you who've been following the blog and the occasional war game videos I've had, I've got my figures, my armies of Greyhawk that I've been painting. This is some medium infantry spearmen from that are going to be from South Province. So we'll see how that works out. Alrighty, so tonight's chat is supposed to be about the City of Greyhawk, and there's a lot. There's, as with many things Greyhawk, there are 2 or more different actual cities, right? So there's the one that everybody knows about, the City of Greyhawk. And again, I can't see myself, so I don't know how much this is in frame, but this is the blue box. So there's that City of Greyhawk box set, and it's got, the 2 books, the Folk Feud and Factions, and the Gem of the Flaness book. That's the official one. Thank you. Thank you, Toy Adventures. That's the official City of Greyhawk, and there's a lot of stuff involved there. Thank you, Rubens. Those are obviously, that's the official one. It came with a map. They eventually released a much better map that was kind of filled in more, making it seem more like a metropolis like Lonkmar or Waterdeep than the original map, which was rather sparsely populated inside the walls. I have it here. So, and you can see there's a lot of green, not a lot of dense buildings right on top of each other. It didn't really convey the image of a great metropolis kind of place. And so I think it was an RPGA came out with a better map that they released digitally. I forget who did it. I know I should know, and I forget the name. But yeah, Brett, that's there is another better map floating around out there. And a couple of us in the fan community have also released our own maps. I know Malden's got his own map that's available on his website. And I also did mine, which are available on the blog in the free, should be in the free downloads. Can I do, I don't even begin to know how I should do that. I was going to say, can I do a picture-in-picture? I could show you my digital file, but I basically, back in college, before there was a City of Greyhawk box set, I did a map based on the map in Gary Gygax's City of Hawks. And this is where we get another version of Greyhawk, because there's this map in the beginning of the book. And it's very small, just gives the different quarters. There's like a couple of paragraphs of description, but it shows you like where the different quarters are and so forth. And I did a hand-drawn map of 4 8.5 by 11 sheets that basically blew up that map, and I filled in buildings and roads and stuff like that. But what I did later on, once the box set came out, I keyed my map to the locations in the Gem of the Flyness book, so that if you, on my map, if you go to H17, Goloretti's Buchanan's house, there is an H17 on my map. So I could use what I thought is my better map with all the good material that's in the box set. And it's a really good mix of the two. Then somebody came along and digitized my map just out of the blue. Hey, here's a digital copy of your map. And then somebody else came along and colorized that map. So now there's a digitized, colorized version of my map that I did back in 1985 or 86. And it's really cool. I actually printed it out and laminated it, and I tried to find it for tonight's live stream, and I couldn't. It's here somewhere, and I just couldn't find it. It's probably in some closet somewhere. Yeah, exactly. Toy Adventures. That's what the map that I did is much more in keeping with Gygax's original. It follows the same outline. It has the same quarters in the same places, and the Citadel and the Bastion and all that good stuff. The streets that he mentions. Because if you look through his novels, especially the early novels and the collection of short stories, there's a ton of details about the city itself. And I can't imagine that it is verbatim exactly how the city was played back in the day. It's on the blog, Toy Adventures. It should be under free resources at the top. If it's not, let me know and I can add it afterwards. So I doubt it's exactly the line for line the same map, but I'm sure it's very close to the way that Gygax ran his City of Greyhawk. And we do know that the city was a very important part. I dug up some quotes. Rob, who was the co-DM of the campaign, said that the city was vital and integral to the campaign. Gary rendered one map for it, which would now be Old City by comparison. And when I came on board, we did 3 more 8.5 by 11. So he had 4 8.5 by 11 sheets like I did. and here, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. There was lots of adventure in the city. Robillard, Tensar, Tarek, and others had fantastic times in it, and some of these adventures are recounted by Gary in Dragon Magazine in his Up on the Soapbox articles in the later years of Dragon. And he's recounted some as well. Merlin's, Don Kay's PC was housed there. Robillard had his Green Dragon in there. Certain Ernie Gygax's priest henchman of Tensors was killed there by Tom Chempany's evil high priest. The Striped Mage got his secondary name through my brother's PC, the monk with no name, painting his tower. And in fact, that's one of the stories that's in Dragon, the story of painting of the monk painting the stripes on the mage's tower. Initially, Robillard initially adventured in strange way, an odd alley, getting lost and so forth. So it was very much an adventure zone in the original campaign. Hey, Satori, great to see you. And TR says that the map is there. Excellent. Thank you, Satori. I hope you have fun with this. I can, we'll keep going as long as I can keep talking. So, basically my map, as you'll see it if you download it, it's much more packed full of buildings, and my buildings are all irregular. I mapped out like the big streets and the major thoroughfares, and obviously there's the Citadel and there's the Bastion, which are the two castle areas. There's the big streets, the major thoroughfares, and then we've got the different quarters of the city. So there's the foreign quarter and the river quarter and the slum quarter and so forth. And I kind of made the building blocks suit whatever area they're in, because like when you're in Old City, when you're in the slum quarter or the thieves quarter or whatever, the buildings are very tiny and have a lot of maze-like alleys between and around them. Whereas if you go into the what do you call it here, the low quarter or the river quarter, they become the buildings are bigger, and they're not quite so twisty-turny around them. There's still a lot of that there, but it's not nearly as much of a maze as as Old City is. And then you've got the high quarter and the garden quarter, which obviously have these big estates surrounded by parkland and so forth. And so I tried to make them, suit whatever quarter they were in the city, which I think worked out really well. Toy Adventures, thank you so much for the tip in the tip jar. I really appreciate it. It really does matter, and it really does help. So when I was putting my map together, that's what I was going through my mind in that. And I obviously put in as many of the landmarks from Saga of Old City, which was the first Gord the Rogue book, into my map as I could. So there's the prison, there's the different temples, there's the university and stuff like that. So I tried to put as much in there as I could. So I was very pleased with the way it turned out. And then, like I say, somebody just comes out of the blue, and now I've got a beautiful digital color copy of it. So that's neat. So in addition to the box set, there are the Falcon modules that take place in the city, and one of the I believe it's the module where the cult of Vecna kills the Circle of Eight. I think a lot of that takes place in the city too. There's also several bits and pieces in the From the Ashes campaign book. Obviously, this takes place in 585 rather than 576, so it's 9 years after, which is an interesting point we will get to in a sec, as to when does the box set happen. But there's because they tried to reorient the World of Greyhawk campaign around the city of Greyhawk. We started to see more detail in every progressive, Greyhawk product, where it was supposed to be this is your new core thing for Greyhawk. You would have, like here, the campaign book. The campaign book is set around what they call the Greyhawk. What's it called? The domain of Greyhawk. and because when they advance the timeline, pardon the dog, when they advance the timeline, the city of Greyhawk kind of took over a large swath of territory, including Hardby and part of the northern Wild Coast. So, when they when they did that, they wanted to center the campaign. So when you started a new campaign in the world of Greyhawk, they wanted it to be in the city of Greyhawk and around it. So you get a lot more details, the physical changes in the city, social changes. This is all stuff that happens post wars. So so that's what's happening in the city there. And then later on, they do the same thing again. When we get The Adventure Begins, we get the same thing, because this is supposed to be your new, guide to the world of Greyhawk and setting a campaign in the world of Greyhawk. When you look in here, it does the same thing that the campaign book from the Ashes does. It gives you an overview of the climate and the lands, and here's what happens in the city, the domain city, the big NPCs, the government, the languages. It gives you a little primer on the city and how to set a campaign in that city. Once again, so what you see once we have the City of Greyhawk box set and then these subsequent products is they kind of recenter the entire Greyhawk campaign world on the city. Because remember, before then, the world of Greyhawk didn't really have a spiritual center. Toy veg. Oh boy, do we have a dog. She's upstairs. My son just came home. That's why she went nuts barking. He was at New York Comic-Con this weekend, so he's had a time there. Hey, Pavel, great to see you. Thanks for dropping in. Cutter John, welcome again, and thank you all as always for the tip. It really, really does help. It really makes me feel good, but it's also on a practical level. Every dollar I get from the free stuff here is another dollar that I don't have to get from something that I sold. So it really does help, and I really appreciate it. Peru. Excellent, Pavel. Great to see you. Thanks for coming all this way virtually. I'm glad to hear there are Greyhawk fans in the Southern Hemisphere. So you're heading into spring as we speak, just as we're heading into fall. So that in that sense, they kind of center the Greyhawk campaign, because before then, it didn't really have a center per se, right? Because you had in the box set and in the folio, obviously the City of Greyhawk is in the center of the map. And I talked about that in one of my videos. When you only have one map, it really changes your perspective. But when you have both maps, the City of Greyhawk is squarely in the middle. But despite that geographical thing, you didn't really have any way of using that in an adventuring sense, because you didn't have any details about the city itself other than little scraps you could glean here and there. The closest thing they had to a center was, several hundred miles to the southwest in the Cron Hills. You had the Temple of Elemental Evil and the village of Hamlet. That was really, from an adventuring standpoint, that was the center. And then you also had the stuff out on the Spindrift Isle, on the island Spindrift Isle. You also had things in isolated adventures here and there, but you didn't really have one location that could act as the locus of the campaign until they came out with the box set. And then when they had that, they really went and ran with it. Martin from Japan, thank you for coming. Wow, this is great. I'm loving this. So many Greyhawk fans scattered hither and yon. It's wonderful to see. So from a historical standpoint, from a meta historical standpoint, that's how the city kind of progressed. You had Gary's original, which was a one sheet 8.5 by 11, which I would guess looked pretty much like this that we see in City of Hawks. And then when Rob came on board, they expanded that out, but with 4 more sheets. And then, then after he left, TSR went and published the city. And then as they went along, they continued to develop the city and expand it. And as the timeline ran on, they made changes to the city, which is great. Oh, and Rubens is from Brazil and Satori is from France. This is like an international chat tonight. This is awesome. So from that perspective, we do have the 2 Greyhawks, and what I tried to do was kind of mix the two, because I took the map from Gary's campaign and a couple of places, and then I took most of my places and NPCs from the box set, and I kind of smooshed them together. And I had, from my perspective, that was the best way to do it. I would love to hear in the chat. Let me know if any. I'm assuming that at least some of you have used the City of Greyhawk yourselves, your own campaigns. Please feel free, chime in with with how that worked. What did you do? Which version did you use? Did you just run straight out of the box set? Did you make changes? I'd love to hear in the chat. Say how you used it yourself. One of the interesting things that that I thought was interesting too was the city. In the city box set, they also came out with these one-page adventures, and I know they did some in the From the Ashes as well. And I forget which box it was in, but one of them had like a goat running for mayor or something. It was just so absurd. And then they've got a Wastry adventure in there, which I always love because I love Wastry. But I love that idea that you can put these little one-page quickie adventures set in the city, because that's one of the beautiful things about using a city like that for an adventuring hub, is that you can do adventures without leaving at all. You don't have to go to Castle Greyhawk if you've got you've got the slum quarter and the river quarter, and toy adventures. Yes, they do. It's actually called the strip. It's between the river quarter and the low quarter, and that's where there's a scene in several scenes in the Gore the Rogue novels that take place there. So if anything could be called Greyhawk's Tenderloin, that would be it. And let's see what else. When you do that, you have this self-contained adventuring area that you can have. It's a very monster light idea when you do urban adventures. Urban adventures, to my mind, are always the toughest. It's on the one hand, it's the toughest to write, but in some ways, it's the easiest to run if you do it like me and you just kind of go off the top of your head. Because there's so many things going on in a city that it's very easy to drop adventure hooks in front of the players. It's very easy for them to interact with new PCs because they walk 20 yards and there's a new NPC that they can interact with. On the other hand, it's very rare that you're going to see an actual monster in the city, notwithstanding the urban encounter areas that we saw in the Dungeon Master's Guide that had like vampires and stuff like that, demons walking around in the city, which didn't make a lick of sense to me. But that's also where we got that infamous sub table on the harlots, with the what were they? The saucy trumpet and the saucy strumpet and I forget the exact ones, but that's where that comes from. Satori, thank you so much for the €5. It really, really does matter. Really, really appreciate it. And okay, so let's see what do we got here. Has the box set, but it didn't really gel. I think if you try my idea, Slovenly Troll, thank you, Brett. That's one of them. If you try the hybrid approach with a different map, either Malden's or mine, and you can still use the material from the box set, I think you'll find that might work out a lot better. And then Satori, haven't set foot into the City of Greyhawk. They're hoping to. You're getting ready and got the City of Greyhawk. Excellent. Don't forget, you can also get the Falcon modules. I don't use them as modules because I honestly don't like them as I don't like the plot a lot. But there's a lot of nice detail information that you can find in there and use. Another thing that I've used in my Greyhawk City adventures a lot are the old Lonkmar adventures, the stuff that TSR did when they had the license for Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. All of those Lonkmar adventures and a ton of the more generic stuff they produced for the city. You change the names here or there, and it works fine. And one of the reasons that does work so fine is that in a lot of ways, the City of Greyhawk is modeled on the City of Lonkmar. So it should be no surprise that the Lonkmar stuff, I think it was for second edition, fits so well with the City of Greyhawk. I mean, I've dropped entire adventures in there. Just single encounters works. I've also tried to use the Forgotten Realms had that city system thing. I found it to be not as generic as I would have liked. It seemed like it was geared much more towards Waterdeep, and thus it was very, some of the specifics were too specific to really use in my Greyhawk city. But there is some stuff that obviously can be used. There's a lot of random tables that are good. But I for some reason it was too realmsy for me, for whatever reason. The Gord the Rogue novels are Toy Adventures. The Gord the Rogue novels are really fantastic. Even if you don't particularly care for the prose, I mean, it's Gary Gygax. He writes. He has a style when he writes, and that's how he's going to write. But setting that aside, and also setting aside the fact that he kind of destroys the world at the end, we can talk about that on another date. The wealth of information that is in the books about the city and about the Greyhawk campaign in general is phenomenal and so useful. There is a site on the web somewhere. It's called Gord's Greyhawk, and it just goes through and catalogs everything: NPCs, locations, magic items. I mean, everything that was mentioned in the Gord the Rogue books is in this site, and it's broken out by Beyond the Flanness and different planes and NPCs and stuff like that. So do search that out. Gord's Greyhawk. I forget where it is exactly, but if you search for it, you'll find it. And it is a fantastic, if you're interested in really plumbing the depths of the details that are in those Gord the Rogue books, that is the best place to go. Let me catch up here. Longmar. So TR, let's see. I started with the Folio and actually used a modified version of City State of the World Emperor and Longmar. Oh yes, City State of the World Emperor. Oh my God, that brings me back. I was big into the Judges Guild stuff in high school. I had it all. I had the City State of the World Emperor. I had the City State of the Invincible Overlord. The City State of the Invincible Overlord is just it's one of those foundational things. I think it was the first fantasy city. I've got the original blueprint. They did a Kickstarter a decade ago, maybe. And I got the original blueprint somewhere in a closet for that. It's a phenomenal thing. But City State of the World Emperor is Viridistan is just an unbelievably great looking city. There's a lot of cool stuff in the books too. But in terms of the graphic approach of that map, that big, huge, expansive map with the hexes, it looks amazing, and I could absolutely see using that for Greyhawk if before you had Greyhawk. I absolutely could see doing that. Yes, the Gygax destroying the world out of spite. Yes, you are not wrong. I might even say petulance, but it is, yeah. But then, after he reconciled, he came out with a couple more Gord stories, and which kind of, while they didn't walk it back, they showed you could set things in before all that stuff happened. So there's a little bit of reconciliation there. Verbabank and City of Greyhawk are the two big cities. Are there any similarities or differences? It's actually, if you're going to pick two big cities that are close to each other, it would be Divers and Greyhawk. They're the two cities that are really rivals with each other. And I believe the way it was supposed to work was Greyhawk is Chicago and Divers is Milwaukee. I think that was how it was supposed to work in terms of the mapping. And I mean, Verbabank is also a big city. And of course, there are other really big cities too. There's Rel Astra, there's Rauxes, there's Rel Mord. So there's other big cities out there. Daraka, we actually got in a module, which was nice. But yeah, Greyhawk is really the one. But yeah, Divers is the other one that's really its big rival, and I wish they had done more with Divers, because I love the idea that you've got these little independent city-states are basically how the South Central Flonesse is organized, right? So you've got Verbabank, which is semi-independent. You've got Divers, you've got Greyhawk, you've got Hardby, you've got all the towns on the Wild Coast. You've got this cluster of just these city-states. And I like that idea, and that's not explored enough in my mind. The fact that you've got these regions of the Flonesse that have ways that they're politically organized. You've got this cluster of city-states in South Central. Above the Near Dive, you've got a cluster of petty nobles, right? So you've got the bandit kingdoms, and before Ayuz rose to power 100 or so years ago, that system of having a bunch of petty nobles spanned all the way from what is now the bandit kingdoms all the way up to to where Ayuz is now. So you have you have this whole swath of little petty baronies and dukedoms and kingdoms and so forth, and then of course Ayuz comes along, consolidates a big bunch of them. Then he gets captured by Zagig, and it all crumbles back. And then the Horn Society comes in, But at one point, that was all you had. You had this constellation of a whole bunch of little places, and then on the outskirts of that, you've got the more organized kingdoms. So forward to the east, you've got the Great Kingdom and Nairon, and to the west you've got Valuna and why am I blanking? Furiondi and Kaoland and their satellite states. So you've got I think there's more depth to that. In fact, I might make a video about that just on its own. So let me here we go. Divers, right? Okay. Oh, Pavel retracted a message. So I didn't, and I missed it. I apologize. So in terms of the cities, I love that. I love the idea of urban adventures, but like I said a little earlier, I find it really hard to write urban adventures, because an urban setting to me is such a sandbox. Finding ways of getting the PCs from one encounter to another pre-planned encounter to another pre-planned encounter without it being really railroady, I don't have that knack. I did it. I took a stab at it when I did my City of Spiders, the D4 that's set in Errol Kinlu, the Drow city, and I did my best of setting things up. But even then, it comes down to setting up a bunch of encounter areas and leaving clues around that will send the PCs there. But you have to also then be prepared with other things in case they don't pick up on those clues and do what you think. So, for example, if you've got an urban adventure set in Greyhawk, you might have an encounter with a pawn shop owner. But if the PCs don't go there, they go off to, I don't know, the temple of St. Cuthbert instead. You need to be able to flip on a dime and be willing to throw away that pawn shop encounter and just roll with it. And for me, the conceptual thing is, if I'm going to do that anyway, why don't I just wing the whole thing? With a couple of big objectives, and then just wing it. Louisiana, none of your nonsense. So for me, writing them is really hard. Running them, I love running city adventures. I love just doing it because the way I do cities, I have enough just detail that I can just pluck out at a glance. That's why I have all the Longmar stuff. That's why I have the city system stuff. Is so I have all these things at my fingertips that I can just drop in front of the direction that the PCs are already going. Rather than having a preordained, pre-scripted, they have to go here to find this, and then they go here because they were told to by this, and then they finally end up at a thing like a normal dungeon adventure where you can control the flow much easier in a dungeon adventure, and to a more limited extent in a wilderness adventure. In a city adventure, I find it just very, very difficult without being heavy-handed and leading the PCs by the nose, which is very unsatisfying for them. I find it very difficult. So I did have, there's several cats, Pavel. We've got Eclipse sleeping behind me. You heard Louisiana somewhere back there. I'm sure she'll make an appearance. Yes, Pavel, that's exactly right. It's the ultimate kind of sandbox. And in order to run it that way, I just find it very difficult. I don't want to railroad it. I don't say that Falcon sucks. It's one of those things where it feels railroady to me. I like some to my mind, the best adventures set in an urban setting are the ones that are location based. So, for example, if you some of the Lonkmar adventures, for example, once the PCs get to a particular location, like the Thieves Guild or whatever, then it's a much more self-contained thing. So that might not be what most people consider an urban adventure, because they're not adventuring in the urban environment. They're adventuring in a particular part of it. It's a subtle distinction. But I find the things that give a lot of detail to a specific location, for me, are more useful than an adventure that wants to have a plot that is followed, which means they have to go to this part of the city, then they have to go to this place, then they have to go to this place. So like I say, so when I say I don't like the Falcon adventures, it's because they try to do that. They try to superimpose a plot which requires the PCs to go here and here and here, which to my mind isn't the best use of an urban environment, if that makes the most sense. Area of the Slave Lords is a good example, because but it focuses on a very specific thing where the PCs are limited because they're in that part of the city. Now, I should say there is an urban adventure that does manage to do this without feeling railroady, and that is City of Skulls, the IU's adventure that takes place in Daraka. Is it Daraka or Molag? I don't remember now. Whatever it is, I'm gonna say Daraka, and where it works because the PCs come to the city with a specific mission in mind, and they're given some direction as to how to infiltrate the city. But there are some locations in the city that are directly related to that objective that are very well fleshed out. But the adventure lets you. The adventure lets the DM kind of let the PCs roam around in the city, trying to feel their way through until they get to the parts that they need to get to. They have that infamy mechanic, I think it's called, where the more havoc that the PCs wreak in the city, the higher the rating goes, and the more likely it is that they're going to start sending out patrols looking for them. I think that's a brilliant idea, and it's something that you could use that in Arrowhike Inlet, the Drow City. Absolutely. The more things that the PCs do to honk off the Drow, the higher that level goes. And once they get to this, then use these encounter tables. And once they go up here, now we're going to have these encounter tables with even more guards looking for stuff. So I think that's a brilliant mechanic. And that is a great way of having an urban adventure that lets the PCs do their sandboxy thing, but they still have a single objective that's in a single place, in the prison. But it's up to them really to figure out how they're going to go from infiltrating don't they infiltrate through the sewer or something, and then they have to get there. There's a whole bunch of stuff that they can do in the city, and it gives you just enough crumbs to let the DM kind of fly with that. And then eventually they'll get to their real objective. That's the best way to do it. If you're starting in the city, though, that works because they're coming from the outside and they're going to the city to do this one specific thing. If they're based in the city, it becomes much harder to do that, because then they start to have their own interactions. They've got NPCs they've dealt with a dozen times. Oh, they know this innkeeper, they know that innkeeper, they know this wizard who lives in the tower, they know this pawn shop broker, they know this thief, they know this beggar. When you have a cast of characters like that in a city environment that the PCs have been interacting with a lot, which is the way to do it. If you're going to do that, have NPCs that are fixtures, and that have good relations with the PCs. You want the PCs to feel at home. You want the PCs to have resources in that city. And the best way to do that is to have them have friends, like with a beggar who can see everything that goes on because nobody pays attention to him. They know this pawn broker down here who they can fence stolen goods with, or they can inquire about stolen goods that other people might have fenced. They know this innkeeper. That when you set up those relationships, it becomes much easier to run these kinds of urban encounters, because you're building up these NPCs, and you can add on layers and layers and nuances and things. It becomes much easier to do. Hey, Squirrel Hermit, how you doing? Welcome aboard. Glad you're here with us. All right, let me catch up here. Brett says, I ran the Falcon Adventure when they came out. I don't remember anything about them. They were kind of meh about the campaign. Yeah, I think the biggest draw about the Falcon Adventures was those paper buildings. And I've actually got one of them. I forget which one. I got one of the Falcons. It's still in the shrink on my thing. So I shudder to think what that's worth. Pavel says it's very hard not to try a railroad in an adventure. The trick is to PCs, let them wander around without losing the main direction. Well, that's just it. If they're just wandering around, you need to, there's a subtle art of nudging them back towards the plot, which is really hard to do in a pre-written adventure where there is a plot to follow, as opposed to City of Skulls, where there's not a plot to follow so much as there is an objective to achieve, and it's up to them to figure out how they want to achieve it. And I think that's the major difference. I use the Lankmar stuff for my legendary mystery city beyond the land of black ice. Yes, good. Yep. Use the Falcon Adventures for exactly using the Falcon for more info. It does give you good details on that area that got burned out and stuff. There's a lot of material that can be used in the Falcon Adventures. I don't mean to say that it's not worth getting, but running them as an adventure for me is not the way I like to run urban adventures. And then railroading without exactly railroad them without them realizing that you're railroading them. Yeah, that is the trick indeed. I actually had an idea, and it would be a bear to write, but I still want to try it someday, of having a city and having a grid of adventure paths, right? Of plots. So let's say there were 10 plots in a grid. So plot A goes down like this, and plot B goes like this, and C and D and so forth. And then across you would have locations. So, you've got this inn and this inn and this inn and this pawnbroker and this guild hall and this and this and so forth. And then each of those locations could feature in multiple plots, right? So that you get the feeling that there's a lot going on. So if you're in this, there's going to be something relevant to plot A and plot G and plot L and plot double B, all happening in that. And then if you go to this place, then you're going to go from other ones, and that maybe they overlap. And that way you can let the players follow the threads that they want to follow, rather than this is the thread, you better follow it. Because if they're following plot A and they're at the tavern, and all of a sudden there's something relevant to plot G happening at that same tavern, and they go whoop-doo, and they want to, all of a sudden they make a 90-degree turn, they want to follow plot G now they're able to, and then you can just pick up plot G over here. And then you could have them maybe worked out by level. So plots A through D are for lower level characters. Plots E through M are for mid level. Something like that. But like I said, you can imagine what it would look like, and you can imagine how much effort it would take to have that, to work that out. And then what happens, 4 years later, when you say, oh, I want to do a revision, here are 20 more plots that you can plug in. Well, now you need to really plug them back in with all the other, there's some logistical things. But personally, I think that would be the way to go, because that you preserve the sandboxiness of it, but you also have plots that can be followed. So. Don't mind me. I'm just reading all your comments while I was waxing loquacious there. City Band on the Ice, Railroad them. All roads lead to Rome. Good, the Dungeon Master. Okay, pretty cool. And you also love the idea of an interactive online map. Well, Satori. That's something maybe they could do on Cannon Fire, like they did with the Underworld map. Where they fleshed out all those encounter areas in the D1 through 3 map. Maybe some sort of city like that. I wanted to do it in Stoink, because Stoink, which featured in Saga of Old City, that's where Gord ran into Gellert for the first time. And apparently in Gary's original campaign, the city-state of Stoink was a real hotbed of adventure, and a lot of his PCs ended up going there, and they adventured around a lot. He even mentioned it in Dragon Magazine as a product that was going to be coming out. It was called Wasp's Nest, the city-state of Stoink. That always stuck with me, that name. I think it's a wonderful name. And I was going to do that. I was going to do the grid idea in Stoink. And then I found out that Gary's original notes and maps and everything for Stoink still exist. And the last thing I want to do is to do all that work and everything, and then, now they decide they want to come out with the city-state of Stoink as an adventure thing. So that kind of threw me back. I know I could probably just pick another city and do it there. It shouldn't be that hard. It just kind of threw me when I was like getting all ready to do it too, and then all of a sudden there was an AMA, and I asked that question, and we have the whole thing's here. Maybe doing it in Dullstrand or something like that would work. But anyway, that's someday I'll get to that. Thank you, Squirrel Hermit. Glad you enjoy the channel, and I'm also glad you enjoy the Adventures Dark and Deep. I'm kind of pivoting. I don't know if you've all noticed, but for the Adventures Dark and Deep stuff, I am pivoting away from Adventures Dark and Deep as a standalone rule system, and I'm doing much more with it as a line of supplements that you can add to your existing games, like First Edition or Labyrinth Lord, Swords and Wizardry. What's the one that everybody likes now? Old School Essentials. It's stuff that you can just add on to an existing game. I know some people do play it as a game unto itself, but I just think there are so many such games out there, and giving people the opportunity to just pick and choose what they like and add it to a game they're already playing makes a lot more sense. And so that's kind of the direction I'm moving in now. Yeah, toy adventures. That's the thing. It's just my own personal preference of how I like to run the city adventures. I prefer to just step back and let the PCs go, and that really doesn't work with a preordained plot. Now, if I have 10 plots that I can, or 20 that I can dangle in front of them, and they can pick and choose whatever they want to do, that's another thing. I'm reminded of of an article that Ed Greenwood wrote in Dragon way back, might have been in the 50s or 60s, about how to create a campaign. And one thing he said, which stuck with me all these years, is he mentioned something about one campaign I play in is set in a desert city, and there have been many nights when no dice have been rolled and no swords have been drawn, where we just spend the entire night interacting with NPCs, following up leads, and having a wonderful time doing it that way. And that, to me, is the best way that a city adventure can be run. It's if you want to role play, a city full of NPCs is the place to do it. And of course, there can always be excuses to have swordplay. You can have thugs in alleys. You can have all kinds of things. But the where a city adventure really comes into its own is the ability to have those role-playing interactions with all those NPCs, especially long-term NPCs that the PCs have interacted with for months or years in game time. So they have a real understanding of them. I think those opportunities are really why you want to run something in a city, rather than, it's just you're running a dungeon in a city. Why not? Why not just do it in a dungeon then? So had adventure session, where they never left the inn. Exactly, Brett. That is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. I've had those too, and for my money, those are among the best. So. Now, in terms of the City of Greyhawk itself, we could spend hours and hours and hours going through all the different NPCs and stuff like that. One of my favorites, though. Oh, right. There was one thing I wanted to talk about, is the question of, when does this happen? This is something I've been wrestling with for a while, and fans have come up with all kinds of inventive answers to the question. And the reason it's an issue is because in the Folk Feuds and Factions book, they mentioned that the Shield Lands no longer exist. They have been conquered, and there are refugees from the Shield Lands here. But they don't mention anything else about the Greyhawk Wars. And it's a conundrum of the timeline, because according to the Adventurer's book for the Greyhawk Wars, that spells out all the different things that happened, the Shield Lands fall, kind of towards the beginning of the wars, but a lot of stuff has also happened, none of which is mentioned here. And I think they kind of retconned the fall of the Shield Lands because they had mentioned it here. Then they felt obligated to include it in the Greyhawk Wars itself, but it still raises the question, because this does not take place in 576. This does not take place in the same year that the Gold Box or the Folio does, because it has the Shield Land refugees. The murder. Oh God, I hate murder. I do not like playing with a band of murder hobos. That's just my own personal preference, and that's just the way it's going to be. But in terms of when does it happen, is it 582, 583? It's probably not 584, because we would have seen a lot of other changes that would have gotten mentioned here. So it's 582, 583, somewhere in there. Those are the kinds of little niggling details that matter a lot to me, and I realize they don't matter a lot to anybody else. But the exact timing of which year this takes place is something that I really want to nail down one of these days. In terms of the my favorite NPC in the city, I think it's Naroth Gaskell, the mayor, because you kind of see him in the background in a lot of things, and he's a member of the Thieves Guild, but he's also the Lord Mayor of the city, and he features a little bit in the books, and we see him as an NPC and a bunch of different things, and I like the idea that the mayor of the city is a thief, and I wonder if that wasn't some sort of subtle and sly social commentary on Gygax's part. But I don't really get the opportunity to use him all that much, because he's the mayor, and finding excuses for the PCs to interact with the mayor of the city can be contrived. But I still like him. I like him as a character. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we are coming up on 8, which is when I have to log off and do the dinner thing. So I will open the chat up for another few minutes. If you've got any other questions or any other things you want to bring up, now is the time. In the meantime, while you guys are tippy typing, I will just give you a quick preview. This is the next module that's coming out. This comes out in November. This is a sequel to Into the Great Rift. This is called Beneath the Great Rift, and it will be coming out, as I say, early November. It is an underworld scenario, and it uses the Darrow, which are villains that I think are really underutilized. I love the idea of the Darrow, of this these underworld near dwarfs, but they're geniuses, and they have savants, and they're cooking up plots to take over the surface world. I love the idea of them, and I don't think they're used enough. So they are the villains in this module and the one that preceded it. So you can look forward to that in a couple of weeks. So anything else? Is anybody typing? I'm vamping too long. Okay. All right. I'm going to give it. I'll give it one more minute, and we'll see if anybody wants to type anything. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this little walk through the City of Greyhawk. Like I say, there are really 2 official ones. There's Gary's that we see in the books, and of course that he mentioned in Dragon Magazine and so forth. And then there's also the official one, the canon one that we see in the box set and in a bunch of other products since then. I think it's a I think it's a great idea. Who actually imprisoned the Elder Elemental God, Baori or Lolth? Oh, wow. I kind of split the baby on that one because the Baori defeated the Elder Elemental God, shattering it into a bunch of fragments, but Lolth holds the key to the prison. So it doesn't have to be, you can have it. You can have your cake and eat it too, because Baori is the one who did the defeating, but somehow Lolth is the one who holds the key. And that would be an interesting tale to tell how that happened. So anyway, hope you all enjoyed this. Thank you very much, Fred. Glad you enjoyed it. Hope you all enjoyed tonight. I will see you again on the next full moon for our madness. Please keep watching the videos, keep reading the blogs. I got more Armies of Greyhawk stuff coming. I've got more other stuff coming too. As I mentioned, another module's coming out in a couple of weeks. Keep an eye open for that. Thank you all so much. I have a blast doing these. I have a blast interacting with you guys. Feel free. Don't forget about the Patreon. If you want to help out, every dollar I get there is a dollar I don't have to get from something I sell. So it's more time I can spend on the free real Greyhawk stuff. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Have a great Halloween, because I won't see you before then. And talk to you later.